everyone. I am Nu-Trix, the synth guy, and today we're talking about iPads. Yeah, 12-inch Pro iPad. I have the original 12-inch Pro from the first generation, and I bought a couple of weeks ago the 12-inch Pro M1. So I'm going to compare the two. How different are they for, music production? What's the differences? And let's start right away with comparing the specs. In this window, we can compare the iPad. I've got the iPad 12-inch Pro 5th generation, which is the M1, and the 12-inch first generation. When you compare the two, they're actually the same size, but physically, the M1 is smaller. So the edge of the M1 is smaller than the edge of the original first gen 12.9 Pro. So there's a difference in the design itself. Physically, this one is actually bigger than the new one with the same size screen, so which is pretty interesting. Of course, the M1 has the M1 chip, which is very powerful, and not just powerful, it's the design itself is a lot more efficient. The RAM, the CPU, the graphic card, it's all in the same chip, so it doesn't have to go to the motherboard and exchange to the, so it's really, really efficient. And it is really powerful. And it runs a lot of Apple computers and iPads today. Whereas this one, the old one, uses the A9X chip, which at the time was like top of the line, but today starts to be older. Then we have the hard drive space. This one could go up to 256 gig. This one can go to up to 2 terabytes. My original one, my old one, is 128 gigs of disk space, and the one I just bought is 256 gigs of hard disk space because I decided to use a SSD drive to back up everything I need. Because now when I bought this one, the folder management system was not that efficient. Now it's almost like a computer, It's not there yet. There's still some software on the iOS that does not permit you to save outside of their, save space. They just don't give you the space to save on the hard drive. So you still need to save locally and then open file management system and move stuff around, which is kind of a drag because it's just another step for nothing. Another thing. Then you've got the camera. Well, in my case, it's important. Most people say, well, if I'm doing music with it, it's not a big of a deal. Well, what's interesting is that the two cameras on this, and the back and the front, they're 12 megapixels. So you've got high quality cameras there. In my case, sometimes I'm going to use this instead of my Sony camera to do my videos because my Sony is not a 4K, it's a HD camera, and this is 4K. So a lot of new stuff I'm going to film is going to be 4K, and it comes from this. Really interesting. So I'm going to use this a lot. Whereas this one, the front is 1.2 and the back is, I think, 8 megapixel. Connector is different, of course. This now is basically USB-C, and this was basically iPad Lightning connector. The pencil, which I have for this one, the old one. This one I didn't buy the pencil yet, but I bought the keyboard. So I've got this little keyboard here, which is very interesting. And this is magnetic, so you can attach it where you want, and then it can really fold. So the whole package is really nice, really cool. I can use it as a computer, and then I can use it as an iPad. So the real question is more about how do they perform for music production. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to open up different softwares, and I'm going to run them side by side and see how fast or slow they're loading, the CPU usage, the processing that it takes to run a song. Let's do this. So what I'll do now, I'm going to actually test out some different softwares and compare the two. I'm going to open Cubasis 3. You saw this loaded almost instantly, and this takes more time to load. So right away, there's a difference in how fast this one, and I'm going to go here and I'm going to load this one. Same song. See how fast this one loads? This one's not even loaded yet. So right away, the speed just of opening up and closing and saving is just like faster. If I turn on these little things here that shows me the system info, the CPU, when I'm not playing anything, is at 1%, and the DSP is silent because there's nothing playing. Now if I play this one, 4% CPU, and it's between 11 and 15 of DSP. That's the M1. This one we're at 13% CPU and between 15 and 20 DSP. So this is a slight difference, but it means that even this one, even the 12-inch first generation, is still able to take a lot. Now this is an audio track. These are just audio tracks with effects. So the DSPs may be less difficult because it's not virtual synthesizers. These are just compressors and effects. Let's actually try a light system. I don't have the fuzz. So if I go into track 3 and I change fuzz for some, oh, so fuzz is not even activated here. And if I go as track 3, fuzz is not activated. Okay, so it's not a problem. It's not activated anyway. So if we compare the two of them, the CPU now and this one, both of them, the M1 is at 1%. It stopped. This one, the original first gen, is at 5% CPU, even if there's nothing playing. Let's actually play it. I've got 2% CPU, 24% DSP. And if I go this one, I've got up to 16% DSP, actually CPU, and I have only 14% DSP. If I go back to maybe a place that's so actually the CPU here is at 2, this one is at 15, so there's a huge difference of CPU for the same song. Okay, so I'm gonna go, and now I'm gonna go into Zenbeats. Zenbeats for me is an app that I go back to use often. If I open a song, I'm gonna load the same song at the same time. Double click, speed run. This one, the M1, of course, loads a lot faster. It's done. The first gen is still loading it. So there's a definite difference in the speed. So of course it shows that the CPU is much more efficient. At the top I have here, if I'm not playing anything, you see this one is at 28 CPU, memory 77%. This one, the CPU is at 50 and the memory is at 82%. So memory is almost full, the same thing, but the CPU is almost half the amount of CPU being used. So between the first gen and the M1. Now if I press, I don't know, this track is this is a lot more virtual synthesizers. We're running drum, ZZ1, Bleass, Alpha Synth, Model D, and ZC1, sorry. I press play on this one. So the value that we just talked about, it's the same that we see now. Really have, it doesn't move. 28%, memory 75%, 77%. It goes to 29. This one is at 53, 82, 53% of CPU. So it is the same. If I go in and I select another synth, just to see if it is going to change, because ZC1 is the native synthesizer, so it should be less demanding. Let's try a new one that I just bought this week, Magellan 2. Loading, and let's play this one. Now the CPU now, by changing that's it. The CPU went 66%. So I went to 50 to 66, and the percentage now of the memory is 86%. And if I do the same here, just see the difference. Magellan 2. Okay. By doing that, my CPU is now 25%, and my memory is 80%. If I press play, it sounds chaos. So I've got up to 30% of CPU usage, whereas this one I've got 65%. So I'm basically, my CPU is twice as powerful as this one, but the memory usage is mostly the same. And I think it's also the way that the iOS manages memory that might be a lot different, because the way the iOS manages, and that's something we heard about the new version of the iOS, is that companies will be able to ask for more memory space to manage it. So I think that right now, this difference that we see here is about the way that the iOS limits the developers to use the RAM memory, makes it so that they have the same space because they cannot go outside of that space. But still, this one uses a little bit less memory than this one, 86%, 79%, so a little difference. And at the same time, might be a difference in how much, because this one we don't really know. I don't really know how much RAM memory is there in this machine. So interesting. And I'm gonna load another song, open song. And I'm gonna load this one, double tap, yes. See how long. So this one, again, is gonna be a lot of audio tracks gonna be loaded and effects processing. So this one is not a virtual synthesizer. These are basically mixing recorded tracks. So again, faster than this one. If I look at the screen, I've got the same plugins. Memory right away, 81%, 88%. CPU, 9% is being used, 30% is being used on the old one. So you see the difference is almost 3 times faster in CPU than this one, because now I'm not using virtual synthesis. I'm only using processing of effects. So let's actually press play to see if the value changes. 10%, 32%. So a little bit higher, but basically we're at the same numbers, you know? That sounds weird when you have this double beat playing. But that's it. So I would say that in my real life test, with the way the macOS is using or offering developers to use the OS, the difference in CPU power is almost 3 times, or 3 times the CPU power for music in this case. RAM memory, well, I'm not sure that the RAM memory is being used the way we know in computers, because right now, as Apple was offering for the next version of the iOS, is that the developers will be able to ask and request more RAM from the iOS. So it might open up something for us. We'll see. We'll see where this goes. I'm just curious, but I heard about it and I'm like, okay, where are we going to go with that? So that's going to be interesting. Next example, the last one I want to test, and I'm a little bit sad about it because I did the test before, and you'll see that it's still. I used to be a big fan of Auria Pro. I used to go with Auria Pro to be able to mix and master my song. It was, for me, was the best app to use. I'm gonna load the same. That's Solid Point Take 3. I'm gonna take the same song. This one here is a 5-minute long song. You've got a lot of plugins here. If you look at the CPU right away, this one is 45% of CPU being used right now, running all the plugins that are in the memory. And this one uses the 16% of CPUs. Again, almost 3 times as fast. That's what we see. But when I press play on this one, it glitches. It cannot play it. So I was like super happy, saying, okay, when I'm gonna buy this, it's gonna be like killer. Well, same problem. So there's something else. There's something wrong with Auria Pro. I used to love this app, but in the last year it's been so painful to use it that I stopped using it. And I was like, okay, if I get a better iPad, it's going to work better? No. If you believe like me that using a M1 iPad, faster CPU will make your Auria Pro work better, forget about it. If your Auria Pro doesn't work well, I don't know why it's like that. Either you have plugins that are not compatible with it. I'm going to try to figure out why, or I don't know. But for me, it's a big letdown because it used to be my first choice to go to mix my songs, and now I'm just trying different apps to do it, and I have to relearn it. And it doesn't do it the way that I'm used to do it in this one, which is the way I'm used to do with you know, Pro Tools and hardware mixers that I used to be working in the past. So don't think that Auria Pro is going to get fixed just by changing to a faster iPad. That's not the case. So that's just a warning here. But for the rest of it, I mean, it's just like really powerful. The other thing that I'm really happy to work with in this one is Luma Fusion. I do most of my editing for my videos using Final Cut Pro on my computer, but now that I'm moving up to 4K images with my iPhone and my iPad, and I'm going to use the iPad M1 camera, which is 4K camera, really good looking, I think, and the iPhone I have, which is an iPhone 10, again, 4K camera, and I'm going to use that together. But what's really interesting is that I can run this and edit in real time in Luma Fusion in a way that on my MacBook Pro, which is 2015, i7, 16 gig RAM, it just cannot run it. It has to downgrade the quality, and then it just jerks when I play it. So I'm never having a real-time environment where I know that, oh, the mouth is out of phase, it's out of time. But now I can do everything here in Luma Fusion, do all the editing, and I can, even if I want to finish on the computer, I can actually stop it and export it so that I can continue on Final Cut Pro. So this is really interesting for me. I'm testing out an entire new way of editing my videos, and if it goes well, I do a video about how this works. Even my Apple Watch is part of the deal now, because now this one I actually can see what's on my camera filming me, and can I stop recording and start recording. So I'm learning a new way of working right now, and the iPad M1 is really part of the deal for me. It's just it's going to be the next step for my little studio. And of course, one thing that I really enjoy is the fact that the connector here now is a standard USB-C connector. You can connect a lot of stuff that you have right onto it. That's it, guys. That's it for today. If you want more information about the iPad M1, if you have a question about it or test some of the software that I already have, put the question down below. And if you want me to do a video about Luma Fusion, exporting to Final Cut, a little bit of how I'm looking at it right now, again, just write in the comments and I'll be more than happy to dive into that section with you guys. That's it. Stay safe. See you soon.